on the supplier acquisition of ShipStation Supplier. So just giving an overview of what the presentation consists of course, the scope, because the scope is the foundation for all of the objectives that we set in the RFQ that was set up. We're going to go over the supplier management. Of course, we did choose ShipStation, and I will give some information on why and how we chose ShipStation. We'll go over some of the risks, the recommendations, and the contract negotiation. The whole goal of choosing a supplier for Kay's Kitchen is to be able to expand our customer base and create shipments to customers nationwide, still keeping the integrity of the product intact and providing quality to customers. So the decision matrix, that was the first step in choosing a supplier. What we did was we created an RFQ. It had the scope and the overview of our company and what our goals were, and it had some pretty strict objectives. So we chose 3 suppliers based on those objectives. They met all of the high-level requirements, and then we graded them based on each of those requirements. Some of the requirements that we had was a supplier that was going to be able to handle us tripling our customer base within a year, sustaining relationships with customers, and shipping so expansion is possible. Asset versus non-asset based carriers. Asset and non-asset based carriers are asset-based are companies that own their own equipment and their own, so the trucks and the planes that they're using, they actually own them, which creates less liability for us and a little bit more ownership of responsibility on the supplier, versus a non-asset based company is the opposite. So ShipStation does provide both, and in some scenarios we will have to take on a little bit more liability. So why did we choose ShipStation? We chose ShipStation because they're dependable, they're reputable. They've worked with Amazon, they've worked with Wish, they've actually assisted Wish in their huge expansions in the last couple of years. Wish has expanded to like over 17,000 customers, and ShipStation is one of their suppliers as well. They have a lot of variety. They use multiple resources for shipping, so USPS, FedEx, UPS, and they're extremely innovative with their platform. They make it super easy to make payments, track customer data, figure out how customers respond to our purchasing process, and etc. Things like that. With all of this time saving that we'll do and cost savings that we'll experience, it'll give us the opportunity to have a lot more expansion and focus more on our customer base, our quality, and our diversity. So contract negotiation, of course we chose ShipSupplier as our supplier, so in going into the negotiation with them, we want to consider the objectives again. We want to prepare, meaning we want to like gather up all of our bills and show that we do make payments on time. That does typically help when negotiating with suppliers. We want to create some cost incentives, such as we want to meet certain benchmarks within the next year of customer expansion, and we want a supplier that's going to be motivated to keep up with that expansion and the variability. And so we will probably offer them some incentives as we expand. Every time we meet that quota, we'll actually pass some of that revenue on to the supplier. The relationship outlook, we want to clarify that within the contract, give them an idea of where our product life cycle is right now currently, which is in the introduction phase, and we want it to go into the growth phase. So we want to make that clear. We want to let them know. Of course, that would mean that we want a long-term relationship with the supplier, and hopefully that will also assist us in getting good pricing. Risk management, we want to include that in our contract, so whatever sort of agreements for evaluation based on customer surveys, etc., we want the supplier to agree with that. So supplier management, just going a little bit more in depth on our plan on how we're going to control and evaluate and grow with this supplier is the product life cycle. Again, taking that into consideration, the type of relationship that we're going to want with the supplier, service level agreements. Those are super important, not only in the contract negotiation phase, but also as the relationship continues. Some of the considerations that we have with the suppliers is complacency, inflation, change of policies. So you want to keep all of that in mind when we're thinking about how we're going to manage our supply chain. And of course, that all trickles down into continuous evaluation with the supplier, evaluating the earned value, the cost versus the revenue, and the cost savings that we're receiving from the platform, etc. All of that's going to be continuously evaluated, which will prevent us from experiencing like inflation prices from the supplier. So again, some of the risks are just complacency, change of the policy, inflation, bad relationship management, and poor communication. Communication is one of the things that I haven't really mentioned yet, but it's extremely important for us for Kay's Kitchen to communicate clearly and regularly with ShipStation. We also want ShipStation to provide some customer service if needed regarding like tracking packages and if delivery times go off schedule or something of that nature, that we want to make sure that ShipStation is going to be able to step in and give us answers if needed. So some of the recommendations just to ensure that all of these objectives and plans and ideas that we have for the contract negotiation, for the continuous relationship with the supplier, and for the quality for the customer are continuous monitoring of earned value, containing that awareness against inflation, and helping us to inspire growth and actual expansion. Risk assessment meetings, that's going to allow us to pinpoint exactly what situations are occurring and what sort of solutions we need to apply. So if there's specific patterns that are happening, then we need to nip those in the bud and make sure that they don't continue. The measurement of impact, this is huge for all stakeholders. When we measure the impact and the cost and exactly all the process that we have to go through to fix mistakes that are made, it sort of gets everybody invested in the fact of how important success really is. And of course, the best practices are always going to trail back to the WBS and the Gantt charts. Because this is such a foundation for planning, we have the critical path, which allows us to prioritize. It definitely organizes the integration and allows us to track every step of the process with our timeline, and of course always keeping track of our budget along the way as well. So in conclusion, we have chosen ShipStation as the supplier. We have a well thought out plan. It all revolves around the scope and the supplier that we chose. The qualifications for that supplier have been met, and we know exactly how we're going to control and deal with this supplier throughout the relationship. We have our preparation for the contract negotiation all set up. The risk assessment has been done and the recommendations have been made to ensure the success of this project. Of course, everything is going to be reliant on the best practices of the WBS and strategic management, and the whole goal is just to, like I said, continue to expand and diversify our products. Eventually, we would like to be able to go global, and with ShipStation assisting us and providing all these different services, as well as like SWOT plans that we can use even with their platform using the customer data that we receive, it should allow us a lot of time and ability to grow this product and company even more. Thank you.